But let me just share with you, if you are interested, so I mentioned earlier about this notion of design thinking. What we're finding is that, again, in the thirst for figuring out how can we do things differently, people are stepping outside and thinking not just waterfall versus agile or bring lean techniques in, but what are other kinds of methodologies outside of the project space that we might be able to employ that can help us either get breakthrough ideas, find new and different ways of working, and design thinking as a methodology. It's certainly not unique to Stanford, but there is something at Stanford called the Hasno-Plasner School of Design Institute, and they're doing a lot of work looking at how do you take, some of you may have heard of IDEO, it's one of the largest global product design firms, and they design the mouse, and they design these toothbrushes for kids with funny heads on them so kids will brush their teeth and kind of do everything. They now have gotten involved in designing organizational space. I don't know if any of you are in organizations that have invested in kind of a more general open space technology, and design thinking is a lot about visualization and giving people the tools to get together very quickly and rapidly. So we were in an office for a large technology organization. They actually just moved their corporate headquarters, the top 700, not just the top, although the leadership moved from overseas, set up an innovation center in Silicon Valley. In their offices, their conference rooms don't have doors. And they've got technology in the ceilings that rechannel sound, so you can literally be standing right outside the physical walls. They've got a couple of walls and then open on either side, and the sound doesn't go out and disturb everybody else. So that was like the coolest thing I thought. I still can't figure that one out. But what they also have is throughout the offices, they have whiteboards basically on rollers suspended from the ceiling, and a lot of open workspace, so that if I want to grab two of my colleagues, we can pull together and we can literally roll a whiteboard right to the space, and we can start ideating right there and then. Kind of crazy stuff. And so design thinking is all about, the notion behind thinking is all about, the premise is how do we take foggy issues, put it through some kind of a process, and then have kind of an impact. Typically when we try and problem solve, we're looking to, have a problem and identify it and then jump to solution. What design thinking does is it kind of is this upper part of the curve, which is to say, do a lot of our solid data gathering, understand the problem, but then go out and really start to say, how do we generate insights in order to maybe look at the problem, define it differently? So there's a whole notion, a lot of this comes from, it's called ethnography, it's cultural anthropologists who become business anthropologists. So this is the notion for those of you that have a strong customer orientation. Maybe you go out and you sit with your customers, you see what your end users are doing. Certainly there's elements of this in agile development, really creating user stories. How do you understand and get deep insight into the people that you're designing for? Well, from a product standpoint, it's been very powerful. Now think about if I'm developing processes within an organization. How can I go out and rapidly get insight into the current operations and functions that I'm designing for? I rapidly iterate, and then again, there's elements of agile in here, and rapidly iterate and create prototypes before I go and invest, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands to get to an end product or a deliverable that people then don't use. And so there's this notion of being more abstract and then starting to get more solid. The steps in there's a process. This is really more of a circular process, but this was an easy kind of graphic to pull. This notion of empathizing, and there's tools in each of these. Again, if it's something that piques your interest, you're curious about, if you just type D School, Stanford, and Google search it, they actually have an amazing kind of library of free stuff, videos and documents and the like, that you can actually do little experiments and try to apply this in your work. So I'd encourage you if this is something that's kind of interesting to you. But this notion of coming up with deep empathy and defining the problem some different ways, and then prototyping and testing very rapidly and quickly is what's behind it. Okay? So that's design thinking. One last kind of a quote. This is from a woman who's an SVP at Citrix, a software company. And what they've done successfully is they've taken design thinking and pushed it into the IT organization, and highlighted some of the words I think are the key things. Some of this is language, but just as with Agile and Lean and others, it is important the way we reframe the challenges, the way we reframe what we're trying to accomplish. So language is important. Talking about customers instead of end users and stakeholders. It's not to suggest that's not important, but when we have an orientation and kind of shift that, that's important. You know, this is, if you read these, it really is this fundamental shift between building something to servicing our end users or our customers. And so that was a fun, this mindset shift I was referring to earlier has not been insignificant in their success. And anyhow, this is the other piece that's really important. And it's a fundamental characteristic of not only design thinking, but Agile and other kinds of initiatives. We need to create that environment where people can fail, recognize it's okay to fail, learn from their failure, and move on, and there's not going to be repercussions. And we'll talk after lunch about why that is so hard for organizations, and it has a lot to do with culture and structure and how these kinds of instances really play out in organizations. Okay.